by those who have less power and have fewer assets.
Right.
Comfortably.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that this is a fascinating issue. And, you know, when we talk about park accessibility, I think the big question is for who, right? So I think that's a great question. But, you know, I think we need to scale back and work with community to develop an understanding of what these issues are, how to address them before we can even begin to go there. So, yeah, great questions. Keep them coming, Justin.
Well, just one, I mean, you work with Neil Smith at CUNY a little bit. He's written extensively on homelessness in New York City, so if you're in parks. So there are some interesting ways to kind of take his literature into understanding that particular phenomenon, which is extremely complicated. Yeah, exactly. So my question, so you gave us this information about how unequally distributed green space is in Los Angeles, and then said it's with the caveats of concrete versus green space in New York that it's more equally distributed. Is that just an artifact of history? Is it some physical, geographical look? Like what explains, even if you clean up the data for concrete versus green in New York City, does it start to look like Los Angeles, or is just Los Angeles this extreme kind of counterbalance to New York City?
I think that's a great question, and the differences are stark. Here's the big difference. Something very different about New York and Los Angeles. Y'all have ever heard of redlining?
No.
You've never heard of redlining? Okay, so the 1934 Housing Act actually empowered institutions to determine who could live where, right? And in this, in Los Angeles, you know, from the 40s into the 50s, we were seeing a serious influx of people from different groups, right? We were seeing African Americans from the South. We were seeing Latino communities coming from South America, from Mexico, and this began to draw this tension, very much like the tension that we're seeing in our parks in San Jose. So they said, we need to begin to split up these communities. So through redlining, banking institutions were empowered to limit mortgages. They would not grant mortgages to people of color that wanted to live in certain areas. Right? So they got pushed more to, for example, the South LA area. This is why we're seeing geographical concentrations of people of color in certain areas in Los Angeles. We do see this in New York City as well, but not through housing acts so much per se. So in this, we saw neighborhood disinvestment. In the areas where people of color were pushed, they wouldn't get the same kind of resources. They wouldn't get the same kind of parks. Whereas in New York, geographically speaking, we're talking about a much smaller space. If you look at the context of Manhattan, this is an island of 25 square miles, right? With millions of people, it's a little bit more difficult to do that, to go through that kind of process, right? So we're seeing very different sort of geographies, social, political geographies between spaces like New York City and Los Angeles. A brilliant question.
I'm wondering, in your research also, you sort of piggyback what Dr. Melanie talked about things that keep people away from parks. Did you uncover any social, cultural mythologies? And what I mean by that is,
interesting.
When I worked at the Urban College Center in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and we worked with a mentorship program with a lot of the youth in Milwaukee, which is why I segregated. We all found that there was certain sort of mythologies about the woods and what they felt about the fears. A lot of these kids felt they were live tigers and bears. They were going to eat them, the wolves were going to kill them. And these are stories that their parents, passed on to them, and then their parents passed on to them. And that to keep them out from what could be subversive activity, they don't want to be exposed to that. They didn't want them hurt and not missing. These social cultural mythologies get implanted in our mosaic, our cultural mosaic. And that breeds fear and suspicion and aversion to urban areas.
Robert, you nailed it. And this actually didn't come up in the youth project, but in certain projects it certainly has. Particularly working in the context of LA. I'll tell you why. Again, many of the African American communities in Los Angeles stem from the southern United States, right?
Sure.
So when we're talking about this, what do you think the woods meant during slavery era? What do you think it meant post-slavery?
Strange fruit coming from tree.
Right? We're talking strange fruit. Right?
Yes.
You know, I think that song characterizes it best. These were places where people were taken to be beaten, to be hurt, to
Killed. To eradicate.
And you know, people actually, many of the communities that I've worked with would express this. Say, well, we don't want to go to these places anyway. We have this historical pain, this legacy that's attached to these places. But simultaneously, you know, when it comes to urban parks, many people are also saying we have a need for these spaces. I don't want to go deep into the woods, but you give me a nice grassy knoll, I'll hang out there. No trees, please. But, you know, bushes, that's fine. It's a bad joke, but...
Well, in a sense, I think that, I had a similar sort of response to this cultural question, and I've seen in working with community gardens that kind of the opposite, that because of the agricultural relationship through history, through culture, through family gardens, through backyard gardens, that in fact folks who are limited to substandard housing, substandard land around their houses, have disproportionate cultural knowledge that they bring to a community garden. And disproportionate affect and positive feeling about a community garden and culturally appropriate food. You can't buy collards at the grocery store. So it's I'm curious whether you've seen anything written yet about that. Few sort of pieces I've seen. Has that ever been talked about?
Yeah, I mean, this is coming out more. You know, we're seeing more people moving toward these community garden models. More people saying, you know, we know how to do this. I mean, I grew up like this. You know, living in New York. You know, I come from a Jamaican and English family, and my father was like, listen, we have this 4x6 square here. We're going to grow corn, we're going to grow tomatoes. But yeah, the literature, the food justice literature is pushing more and more toward this, about, you know, community engagement in developing their own food systems and bringing that cultural knowledge back. There's also a body of literature that's showing how disengagement with these systems pushes young people away from understanding what it is they're eating. You know, again, we're seeing more fast food, we're seeing more unhealthy food in the urban context, in low-income and communities of color. I had colleagues that have published widely on this, you know, working with youth in an action context, actually growing vegetables, and these kids would, you know, pick up these giant cucumbers and be, one, look what I did, two, I didn't realize that crap was so bad. Seriously. So there is a growing body of literature that looks at the cultural implications, it looks at, you know, people's engagement. That's fantastic. And then I think we have one more.
Yeah, it was literally to those thoughts right out of my head. I was going to ask about you know, community gardens in urban ag, and how you possibly moving this project forward could incorporate that into the green spaces, and what would be the city ordinances against it, because I know just recently coming from Colorado, it was really strict for some reason. Way stricter than it needed to be for some reason. Even like vacant lots was just here, huge bureaucratic process just to use it for something. So how would that be? I mean, would you even incorporate some sort of gardens inside these green spaces? Because, you know, that's such a community builder right there, like you were just talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I really appreciate the question, because here's the thing. You know, when we're thinking about people's active engagement with green spaces, we have to open up our lens. We can't think myopically about parks. We need to think about these broader systems, food systems. You know, when we're talking about health, it's a range of issues. We're talking about exercise, we're talking about healthy food, just so many different issues. So yes, we need to bring community gardens in, one. And, you know, we're seeing a lot of this in our research. People want this. Two, as far as the political systems in San Jose, to be quite frank, I don't know, but I am seeing some very encouraging models. Have you heard of Vegilution?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Vegilution started off as, and I know less about this than the faculty here.
Environmental studies grad students, undergrads.
Environmental studies.
Which I think started off as like a half-acre plot of land.
Started off in the backyards around San Jose State.
Okay, and now it's ballooned into something like 6 to 7 acres.
I'm a push park.
It's pretty big.
It's bigger than that.
Is it bigger than 6
The
acres?
park's bigger, but the growing area is
Around 6-7 acres. And you know, it's all community run, community engaged. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you all want to come. I'm going to go on a tour of the place with my race, poverty, and environment students in October. Some people from the organization have agreed to take them out. So, fantastic questions, and I think keep those questions going. If you're interested and you want to explore these things further, let's walk hand in hand and figure it out.
Agreed.
All right?
Let's thank Dr. Douglas for a fabulous talk. Reminder, there's no seminar next week, and I will announce when and where the location of Dr. O'Malley's talk, because I forget where it is, but it's okay. Don't. If you need a copy,